Welcome everyone to the April board meeting for Ignite CDA. I'd call this meeting to order. If you'll all please rise and help me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I see from our big crowd there, does somebody want to come up with public comment? Maybe about traffic or? Seeing no public comment, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Maybe we should start.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That motion carries.
I didn't catch the second, Mr. Chairman.
Mick and then me, myself.
We're moving too quick.
He's a fast chairman.
Item 5, Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First up is the Lake District letter to taxing entities regarding intent to terminate the Lake District. I shared with you a letter that will be sent to the area taxing districts regarding the agency intent to terminate the Lake District. I assume you all had a chance to look at that. This letter is the first step in the district's termination process. The next step in the termination process is scheduled for the June board meeting, where the board will consider a resolution of intent to terminate the Lake District, which will include a formal recommendation to the Coeur d'Alene City Council to adopt an ordinance terminating the Lake District by December 31st, 2022. Thereafter, the Coeur d'Alene City Council is expected to hold a public meeting and adopt a termination ordinance, which is the final step in formally terminating the Lake District. So I would look for a motion from the board to go ahead and send the letter to the taxing districts. Do you have any questions or comments? Or?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up is the Atlas Project, an update from Mr. Phil Boyd.
Drum roll.
Chairman Hoskins and board members.
Welcome, Phil.
Thank you. So, what I'm going to cover today is just, I'll give some updates on areas phases 1 and 2, talk about the Mount Hink to Ramsey Pit hauling endeavor. Also, on the action item for the board's consideration is the phase 1 and 2 irrigation and landscaping, and then we need to review the entry monument pricing because they're higher than what was estimated. So the board, we are looking for some board direction. So updates on the infrastructure part of it, the sidewalks in phase 1 will be complete next week for the most part, except in front of area 10, where there's a retaining wall to be built back there, so Riviera won't do that. Probably pave phase 1 in mid-May. Phase 2, the lumber lane water services are about the last thing to be completed in there from a buried infrastructure part. Area 5A and 13 has been delayed, and I think because of the water services, and I think we've talked a little bit about this with the board, is we have an idea of where the water services are going to go, and then we put out an RFP, and of course it's different than what we anticipated, and we want to make sure we bury them in the correct location for the proposed use and be as accurate as we can. So we're waiting on the Butler Stone team architect. We should have that information today, and we'll be able to keep La Riviere moving on that. And then the stormwater system will start next week. This is a picture, and maybe you guys have seen this. We were out the other day, and I took this picture because it captured a lot of what was going on. The trucks are coming in here, hauling to the Ramsey Pit. I'm standing up on Mount Hink, and La Riviere actually has 2 operations going here. There's a set of trucks down here being loaded and a set of trucks here being loaded. And then they take off on this acceleration lane to get up to speed and head off to Ramsey, but you can see the materials being pushed down and the loaders are loading it in there.
I thought that was a really good idea, the off-ramp there.
Yeah, that was one of obviously Tommy's ideas as we were working on it.
I noticed it looks like you're about a quarter of the way maybe on filling the pit.
Ooh, Wow.
Just gauging
Those
while
must
I
be
was-
your calibrated eyes, Commissioner
I was
Jordan.
calibrating that when I was sitting in line at the transfer station there, watching them.
I'll see, we'll see how close you are when I get to
Okay.
a couple of slides here.
23%.
I took this picture just to give the board kind of some reference. This is pit 2 coming up, and we've filled quite a bit of it here. You can see how much Mount Hink is up in here. The board might remember during some of the earlier discussions that one of the things when we were negotiating with La Riviere for this contract is that if we came across structural stuff, we didn't want it to turn into some sort of, I don't know what the correct change order fest. We just wanted to be able to move quickly and lightly, and if we came across structural stuff, La Riviere would pick it up and move it into a pile for us. We had an agreed upon unit price. Well, sure enough, we've identified a zone in here, and so when we get to that zone, Tommy will pick it up, stockpile it in a location, and then when we're ready for it, we'll put it back into a location that we need it, which is probably underneath this, which I'll show you here in a second. La Riviere's running 18 to 20 trucks a day. They've got about 5,000 cubic yards a day for a total of 100,000 yards, which is about 25% or 1/4 of what we're moving over there. So Commissioner Jordan wins. They start at 6, finish at 4 p.m., and they should be finished by August, anticipating there might be some slowdowns as the traffic starts to increase. And you guys might have heard about this or you see it happening. There's a number of complaints that have occurred. And of course, as soon as they happen, we get called, Tommy gets called, and they're all his fault because he's the biggest hauler. He has pointed out that there's 4 other major haul operations going in there. When the issues have been attributed to one of his trucks, they're taking care of it. He is actually stepping up and doing some other stuff that we're not paying him for, just to try to be a good neighbor, and we've been working through those things with the city street department, who've been really great to work with. But the documented issues, if someone, if they run a red light or something and it's documented, he's taking care of those guys that do that. And plus, he regurgitates every day to them that we're right in the middle of the public eye. So trying to be as good a neighbors as we can be. So this is the Ramsey Pit. To get your bearings, this is obviously Ramsey Road. You can see the drop right we constructed here, so when the trucks are moving northbound, they don't have to slow way down, they can just slip right into this. Without getting into a long dissertation, unless the board wants to, one of the things we were concerned about is putting that wood layer above the aquifer. The aquifer is about 80 feet below the bottom of this pit. And so we wanted to make sure we were being protective as possible. So we worked with DEQ, the Aquifer Protection District, Kootenai County Aquifer Protection District. And fortunately, we had some really fine-grained soils that were in this area. So we just had La Riviere push them into the pit, compact them. There's about a 2-foot layer in there, and it created a very low permeability layer. Then we'll put the bark and then sawdust on top of that. Then we'll put another low permeability layer on that, direct the water off-site to some very deep dry wells. So then when the water goes to the dry wells, it actually goes past our layer of sawdust. So the objective is just to not get any water into that. It reduces long-term settlement, and it reduces migration of tannins and other things that could come out of the bark in that area. So Tony lived that saga with me as we were working through all those things. Board should also know that DEQ has once again stepped up, and they're coming in with Steve Gill, and his Brownfield group is coming in and doing the RCRA 8 metals. So he's testing the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. There's 8 metals that are primary testing contaminants, and they're coming in and doing that on their nickel, kind of just to double check and make sure we're not putting any contaminated materials in there, which we don't expect, because if you guys might remember, they tested the heck out of Atlas before. But again, it was kind of just important for everyone involved that we accomplish that. This is a shot, actually Troy Tymason sent me this, one of his city staff. captured this photo, but you can see that the material comes in here and it's just dumped in here. And then they load up that side, load up that side. Then when there's a sufficient amount of material, they just start with the scrapers and they pick it up and run it over here. And the scrapers actually provide enough compaction of that sawdust material. And then we'll start all over again. The pile will come over here and then it gets spread across towards the west.
So can I ask you a quick question here? I don't want to get off track, but how much settling do you expect there? You know, the way you're doing this, and you've got, you know, you've got the wood and the bark materials and so forth.
Unfortunately, it's virtually impossible to calculate that
Yeah.
because the characteristics of bark are not well understood, and so are well studied, like other soils are, where you can calculate settlement on it. And so the best we can do is compact it to the tightest density you can reasonably get it to, and minimize oxygen to it and water to it. So that will reduce the amount of settlement that you that is realized there.
Yeah, so it may take a long time to decompose.
Well, hopefully, without oxygen and water, it should be very, very, very slow.
I know on the other side of Ramsey Road, on the west side of Ramsey Road, I remember when that was one landfill pit after another.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Dan remembers, and I remember, you know, when I used to work for an employer in the early 70s here, and I'd be hauling junk in there and stuff, and I mean, they had like a gas burner going, and they'd burn stuff, and then bury it and burn it, and actually, things look pretty stable when you think about everything that I've seen over the years dumped on that side of Ramsey.
Yeah.
That's been pretty stable, so maybe this won't be too bad.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot more care being put into this than there was probably years ago on the other side of Ramsey.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. 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 There's quite a bit of compactive effort. Just the trucks running across it and the scrapers running across it. The geotech engineer, All West, has been satisfied with the approach. There's also, just on that topic, the city Ignite MOU with ITD, you guys might remember it outlined a bunch of bullet points that we had to accomplish. One of them was preparing a geotechnical report that explained how we would do this and
Right.
whatnot. And so we've done that, sent it to ITD. ITD has also been a great partner on this as well, really flexible with what's going on there.
Thank you.
So I wanted to bring one other thing to the board's attention and talk a little bit about how we're trying to deal with it. You guys might remember this image as well. This is pit 1. So Celtice Way is up here. Suzanne is here. Area 6, Area 5A and B, and then Hartwood Road. So pit 1 has been remediated. It's filled. Pit 2 was the image I showed you earlier. This image, which is mostly filled. And then pit 3 and 4 are the ones that still have the mountain on it. When we started, when we excavated this pit, our projected edge of pit at the bottom and the top was really accurate. And we, in order to create these, we had used old historical photographs to try to figure out where the pits were, along with all these test holes, which you can see there's quite a few there. And so this one was super accurate, and we're like, this is great. And we were like spot on with our quantity there. We started into pit 2, chased it out this face, and it turned out all this yellow area was non-structural, which we anticipated it should have been structural. So of course I'm starting to worry that we're going to run into budget issues here. So we've been working through a method where the overall objective for this entire area was essentially to strike a balance. When we spent the money to haul everything away and build a subdivision there, it equated to the value of the property we could sell. So essentially it was a zero-sum game. I don't want to end upside down there. So if we start having a big amount of material here where we have a bunch of unsuitable and it's going to cost more than what we can sell the property for, it will be an issue. And I don't want to deliver you that issue. So I've been working with Tommy to try to figure out how we incrementally do our explorations through here. And I won't bore you with the details, but he's changing. He's been willing to change his means and methods where we're going to mine around the edge like this so we can see the cross-section of what's in the middle. And if it turns out that that middle is just all unsuitable material, we'll probably have to fall back and reconfigure the subdivision that might occur in here. So hopefully that makes sense to the board and that's a direction you want me to proceed in. But I just wanted to toss it out there while we're early in the thinking of it and see if you have any thoughts on it or just proceed down that path.
Sounds logical.
Do you have numbers to that in terms of how large that area is and potential costs?
Not yet, Commissioner Metz, because part of what we've got these numbers right here, where we have calculated how much we thought was structural, but it's not structural. And I can't remember it off the top of our head. What we're waiting to do is for La Riviere to get this operation far enough east so they get further, because right now they're about right in here. We needed to get far enough east so we can start mining this face to see if pit 2 does terminate, where all the historic photographs we have show this, that there was never a pit here. So we're gonna mine to this edge. We're gonna start mining this edge as well. And so we'll at least have those two faces, and probably either at the May or the June board meeting, I'll come back with some recommendations on that. But right now, we're just trying to get the mountain off the top here. Okay, so this is a potential action item on the board's list, the phase 1 and 2 irrigation and landscaping. This green colored map shows you where the irrigation and landscaping would go. So it's all the street side irrigation and landscaping in the subdivision. The board might remember we went through a process of, do we do the low irrigation demand, costs more money, or do we do the higher irrigation demand that costs less money to build? This is an imagery that Del Hatch put together, and this is a plan view that kind of shows on the corners, there's quite a bit of shrubbery in this here. There's quite a good density of trees, and then in between there's grass. One of the nice features about this subdivision is there's not roadside swales. So you see in a lot of the subdivisions you go into, we have the roadside swales, but we went to the more, I guess, I hate to say cutting edge, a little bit unique stormwater system where we're using, it's called an R tank, and it allows you to put a higher volume of water in a smaller footprint. And it did two things for us. One, it allowed us to create more real estate, which you were selling. And two, it allowed us to put in not roadside swales in here, and there wasn't a gigantic increment in cost. It ended up being a better deal because we could sell more property to do it that way. So we've been working through for quite a while with La Riviere, trying to put a cost to the project. It's been a little bit of a challenge, and Tommy's here to answer any questions you guys might have how the pricing is put together. It's a little bit of a challenge because the prices keep changing so fast. And they've gone up quite a bit from when we originally priced the thing. Just the bushes have gone up and the trees have gone up about 20% when we first budgeted it in the kind of the end of last year as we were trying to work through the design and the intensity of what we were going to do through here. So this is, you can see the number of trees, the number of bushes. I broke out the irrigation and plantings, the total cost. And so the options for the board kind of, they span the gamut. One is you can say, go back and redesign the darn thing and take out the bushes and just put in the minimum street trees. The other option is, gosh, let's test the market to see what's happening out there and put the thing out to bid. The benefit of that, the pro of that, is you get a pricing confirmation. The drawback of it is it takes time. We end up with another contractor on the site. We've had this discussion before of whether we keep negotiating with La Riviere or you move forward with La Riviere. The benefit to that is you got one contractor. If they break things, it's their fault. they can fix it, all those things that are associated with it, and we can start work straight away. The con is it's hard to establish a pricing confirmation, because we're always looking a little bit backwards on bids we open. They're looking forward. So it's a challenging time right now to try to assess the value, if we're at the right number. And again, Tommy's here to answer any questions about that the board might have.
So I,
Pretty sad how a 20% price increase doesn't seem bad to me right now compared to a lot of things I'm seeing. And yet it's bad, but. Are you suggesting we go a little bit lighter on some of the bushes and so forth and wouldn't notice it very much, or what are you saying?
Well, I guess I'm putting it out there as an option. Of course, we love the design and we love the idea of creating a great neighborhood and achieving that look at the intersections. It's a little bit unique. It's special. Do you need it to sell parcels? Probably not. We can go in there and put street trees and turf everywhere, and I don't think it would affect the pricing of the project. And I guess that's why I tossed that option out there, Commissioner Jordan, is do we go back and just revisit that and pull some of that, I guess, fancier, atypical stuff out of the project completely? The one other thing, well, I'll just leave it at that.
Phil, just a quick question. You said that this came in over budget, and also the signs came in over budget. What kind of numbers over budget are you talking about? I mean, because we have an understanding pretty well of what we have a pretty good understanding of what the revenue sources look like, and we also understand where we're at as far as the budgeting look like too. But now if we're getting some big changes to that, I guess that's where we need to know.
Yeah, so the last time we met with the finance committee, and I think this was in the memo, we had gone through and we had budgeted the irrigation and the landscaping, and I think our budget was 2.8 million. But when we were at that, it was, we were at 30,000 feet and hadn't got granular enough. The board hadn't decided exactly what kind of landscaping we were doing, so we had this very conservative budget in there. The board might recall the net revenue that came off of that pro forma. When we had 2.8 million in there, the net revenue after you return money to the city was something like 14.5 million. So we're actually lower than what we had budgeted, but we're higher than what we had what Bernardo Wills Architects had estimated. So we're about 20% higher than what Bernardo Wills had estimated, but we're lower than the budget we put in that pro forma that the board had last seen.
Okay.
I'm reluctant to kind of toss those numbers out because
I follow you.
yeah,
see where
I
you're
want to
going.
just, I don't want to say, hey, there's lots of net revenue at the end, because that's not really, our objective in this is to make that net revenue number as big as possible. And Tony and I were having this discussion. We turn stones over every time we see $1,000 or $500. We're turning it over and arguing and looking for those opportunities, because you do 10 of those and all of a sudden it turns into 10,000, and you do 10 more and now it's 100. So that's why I was reluctant to kind of head down that path. I don't want to mischaracterize.
Might be a dumb question, but is it possible, do we know what the driver is of the cost increase in the plants and because I really like that style. Do we know, is it likely to go up? Do we know what the drivers are? And then the second one that would probably give Dell a heart attack is there a way to put in kind of an outline of that and then fill in later, kind of grow into that?
Those are probably both
Landscape?
good questions for you about constructing it later, but I'll let you talk.
during the HOA phase.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, the question?
What's the do we know what the drivers are of the cost increase? or
So
is
the
it
main
just-
driver on the cost increase is the demand. So there's been so much construction, not only in our local area, but across everywhere, that supplies are just not in demand. And so everybody that has something in their hands, as if a Chevy pickup or anything else, they're going
Yeah.
up, because of supply and demand, basically just the natural economy of driving that piece of it up. The other thing that's happening, obviously, is people's wages, fuel. The guy growing the bushes has the same increase of cost. Now he's got to pick them up out of the ground. He's got to ship them to me.
as diesel goes to $5 a gallon, as we all see, he's got to ship all this stuff to us, right? We don't naturally grow a lot of this stuff in our local area. Almost everything on this project, I believe, upwards of 95% all comes off of the Oregon coast. So their drive of their local economy and all those things kind of contribute to what comes down the road.
So it's unlikely to come down in the short term.
It's very unlikely to come down, and as it is with just like groceries and everything else, right? Once it kind of hits a threshold, we don't ever see it coming back, right? I still haven't bought a Snickers bar for what my dad's bought it for when he was my age, right? So as they climb up, they don't tend to, yes, fuel will come down, things will come down. That's when growers and people like this in this market use that to make up for any lost profits that they potentially had during the high times.
Yeah.
When those fuel and stuff. So we naturally might see some percentage of a correction, but I don't think you're going to see a major correction.
So the second question was, is it possible to maintain that kind of schematic, but fill it in over time, or fill it in when the HOAs, so that we still have the design and unique, but it's maybe more just a
Sure.
kind of framework, and then
Yeah.
over time, we spread out that cost?
Yeah, so a handful of things happen with that, and it's a very good idea, and we do this on some projects. But you have to put something in the gap, right? So if you leave a band of bushes out, as you can see on the design, if you leave a big band of bushes out, you don't want just dirt sitting there.
Right.
So you either have to put something, a grass or something to that point. So now you have to establish that other species,
Okay.
maintain it, and then you have to tear that species out of the way to put the other thing in. And there's no guarantee that it won't be twice as much when the HOA is ready to fill in that gap.
Well, we do have a nice, unusual project. I'd hate to see us not do the same with the landscaping.
Yeah.
Now, I think a private developer might lessen the intensity maybe of some of the bushes, just to try and save a little bit there, but not change the concept, So that's something to consider, but I think what we do now is probably what it's gonna be forever, so.
Yep.
Whether we stick with this, or maybe we back off, maybe the intensity of the bushes 20% or something, just that maybe you don't notice too much, and they fill in, or we just stick with what we got.
And the biggest, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The biggest challenge with waiting till later is, as we go through this design, every one of those points has a point of watering, right? So if you leave something out and then you decide to put something in, now you're digging up the main lines, you're digging up the lateral lines, you're digging up things to be able to give that something for water, right? Because all of these things are either Netafin or there's some type of subterranean feed to it, drip system or something that's feeding all this stuff. So as you leave pieces out and then you decide to put it in, you're creating quite a bit of damage in order to get that back to its final state.
Well, I don't think you can really go back, or it's gonna be cost prohibitive. I was just saying,
Just less.
if we thought we had to get some cost savings, like maybe we do a little bit less intensive, and then it just takes several more years to grow in as thick as it would have grown, but it's there.
Sure.
And maybe we don't do that, I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know what the cost difference would be. Right now, it's scary because it seems like the more you wait, the more prices could go up, or there could be more shortages.
Just chasing that idea a little bit, Commissioner Jordan, one of the things, this is a scope-driven project. We have a scope, the Riviera priced it, that's the price to accomplish that scope, and we put a contingency on it. The board could do it a little differently and say, look, we're uncomfortable with that number, we're willing to spend this number, and we want you to dial back the intensity of the bushes to meet that budget-driven number, so dial the scope back per budget. So I think that's the idea you're chasing there a little bit.
Yeah, I think we have to finish it now, I don't think you can go back in. That's just my personal opinion from
Well, I like
these things.
what we're doing there, but talk to us about how much the signs are going to be more.
That's a good suggestion, and so let me move forward to the entry monument. So just to refresh the board's memory, there was 6 entry monuments. There was a major monument at, and I'll show you the pictures here in a second. There was a major monument at Atlas. There was a minor monument on this side. There were 2 monuments at the entrance of Heartwood, and there were 2 monuments at the entrance of Suzanne. So this is what the major monument looked like at Atlas. This was the minor monument. This is also the minor monument at Hartwood. And then these were the monuments at Suzanne. And so they're on both sides of the street. So these 2 monuments are $59,000 apiece. Do we need both of them, or is one of them sufficient? This monument is $48,000 apiece. Do we need both of them, or is one sufficient at Hartwood? And then the same question here is, that monument is $301,000. A little bit of background, there is a big retaining wall underneath it that added quite a bit of additional cost to it. And then this is the minor monument. And so the current estimate on those is $563,000. When Dell Hatch estimated them in 2021, he was at $360,000. And again, his was a very conceptual level. So a couple of different options for the board to think about is one option, and I was just doing the math for you here kind of to characterize it. If we just said we're going to put 1 monument at Atlas, 1 at Hartwood, and 1 at Suzanne, we're at $408,000. So that's kind of, if you just wanted 1 monument at each. If you build all of them, you're at $563,000. We can end up somewhere in between, or we can go back to the drawing board.
So you're saying instead of having one on each side of the street, we'd have one on one street corner? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you might just have the one on the south side of Suzanne, or on the north side. I guess you would have it on the travel lane side as you're headed in. So on Suzanne, it would be on the north side. Let me go back to this.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, one quick question. These have that big timber look, and we talked about maybe using concrete or some sort of lifetime materials that were colored like timber rather than real timber. So how are these priced? Is this real timber or lifetime?
This is lifetime. This is a big piece of steel. That's
Lifetime simulated timber.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
so
this
that's
is
good. All right.
a big piece of steel
Great.
that's powder coated, which added to the cost of it as well. It's a backlit sign. I don't want to say it's bulletproof, because we know that's not the case.
No, but it's more bulletproof, and it won't be faded out in 5 years like real timber would be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that captures kind of the other potential increase. It's 200,000 in the worst case scenario of what we originally had budgeted for the project.
That's still not, I mean, that's bad, but it's not unheard of in the construction industry right now. But overall, in overall dollars, it's not as much as what the landscaping is, though. I mean, the overrun.
Right, yeah, the landscape, we're at about 20% over our original number.
Right, but the total numbers are bigger.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, correct.
Well, now that I asked that in your end, I would rather give up a couple of those signposts where we've got 2 of them and keep more of the landscaping, and that seems like kind of a reasonable blend, but.
Tony, how does this affect our budget?
Well, I was just going to ask Phil, what is the challenge of coming in later and finishing up some of those corners? If we just put one in and then come back a couple years later, is it a big hassle to put another matching entry monument sign like on the other side of Suzanne? I mean, is that?
No, well, that's a good question. Let me think about that for a second.
While he's
Here-
thinking, you want to ask your question, Mr. Mayor? Excellent.
Yeah, I guess my point is, I'm not so sure on the landscaping. If you go back to the slide where it had the dollars on there, if you can go back 20% on the trees and 20% on the bushes, I don't think it changes your landscaping plan that much, to be honest with you. If you add the plantings are 500 and 231, if you reduce the number of trees and bushes by 20%, that's $140,000.
The one item, Commissioner Woodmeyer, the trees, we might have a little bit of a challenge to reduce it 20% because they're required per city ordinance. So the spacing of them is per city ordinance. So we might be able to, we might get to like 15% reduction.
I
But the
thought you had
bushes,
ex-
we totally can.
I thought you had extra trees, but this is minimum city spacing.
No, there is extra
Oh.
trees. Yeah, that's what I guess I'm saying is we'll be able to reduce some, but I don't know that we'll be able to reduce 20%. We might get to
Okay.
10 or 15%. But on the plantings, you're absolutely right, we could do that. And I think that's what I was talking about earlier. If we want to go to a budget-driven project as opposed to a scope-driven project, we can do that.
But if we did that, if we could reach 20%, that would save $140,000. And I just, at some point in time, people are just gonna have to say no, right? You can't always, to these way, way inflated prices, you can't keep always saying yes. Because this whole huge cycle that we're in right now will never end, right? It'll continue to be more. And and some of this is legitimate. Some of it, and I've witnessed it, is purely price gouging. I'm gonna be honest with you. Not saying all of it is, but there's a lot of it that's just price gouging.
I agree. I honestly think the 20% cutback makes sense, and people will stop saying no after a while. I have already in my home. I just said, enough, I'm going to wait. I know things aren't going to go down a lot, but they are going to drop when demand falls. So I'd like to see a 20% cut too.
And I think the other important part to kind of think about is we want the neighborhood to be cool and great and all that other stuff, but does taking 20% out, is it going to suddenly cause the real estate prices to plummet that we're going to get when we do an RFP? I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, and so I don't think that the board's doing any damage, so to speak, by dialing the intensity back on the landscaping.
We're gonna have the other RFP next month, right?
Yes.
So
Next,
this is gonna be a moot point by the time we get the RFP back.
Next Friday.
Yeah, so, I mean, and Steve, I agree with you. I mean, there's a lot of price gouging going on out there, but we're also the benefactor of that with some of the pricing we are seeing and on the values we're getting for the land we're selling too. So I think it's apples to apples to some degree. I mean, we're getting a higher price for the land we're selling because the cost of construction and everything's high right now. I'm not disagreeing that we shouldn't be looking at ways to cut, but I think we're the benefactor of a lot of really good pricing that's coming in on real estate right now.
My thought process was exactly yours too. I was trying to figure out 20%, cut those bushes. Could we get a schematic of what that would look like? I mean, because maybe it doesn't look all that bad either.
I think the other part of it we could do is, if that's the direction the board tosses out, one of the things we might do is get strategic with where we put those, because what we might want to do is put them on the main road where we keep the intensity at the intersections, but we might dial it back at some of these interior intersections where we just go to grass at those. But on the main road where the majority of the public will go, especially on Atlas Road, because it's going to be such a cool drive, do we retain that? And so I would like the opportunity to at least think that
Yeah,
through.
no, that's a good point.
If the board says, reduce it 20% and go figure out how to stay within that budget, then we would think through that. But at least we could get moving on and order the bushes and not go through another price increase.
And then ultimately, can't HOAs decide if they wanted to? And we could have some design requirements around that.
Yep.
No palm trees.
Come on.
I guess the question that I have, and this is not in regards to price, but Tommy said that these products came from Western Oregon, right? It's interesting to me that they would grow something that grows in Western Oregon and then bring it over to our climate, which is significantly different than Western. I mean, they have figured out, I'm sure, but it sure seems to be
Yeah.
unusual that this comes from Western Oregon.
Yeah, and I think that's where the majority of our landscaping material, the stuff that you go
We
get
have
at
a lot
Home
of
Depot
nurseries in
comes from
Bonners Ferry,
there. Yep, there is. There's some up there, yep,
majority of it.
yep.
Yeah, they're rated for our climate, I mean, they're rated for different areas, but for some reason on the coast, they just grow faster.
Yeah.
It's really productive to have those nurseries on the coast. There's a lot of them around Seattle area too, on the west side of Washington.
So do you need
Do we all agree on that
board
20%?
action on that, or just do you have enough?
No, if the board's ready to give us action, then we can get going on it. We have a pile of topsoil set down here on Area 3 or 13 that I would love to move over here so I could get to Area 13, because I need to mine some material out of there. And I don't want to move that pile of topsoil twice. So if the the direction is, gee, reduce your cost reduce the scope to achieve a 20% reduction in this 1.44 million, then that's the direction we would head with that. Through some combination of maybe we don't put anything over here and we still leave the intensity. And I would bring that back to the board to say, hey, we worked through it, because you would still have opportunity to say, well, gosh, we wanted this intersection to have lots of bushes. But at least we would be able to get moving on some of the irrigation, buy materials, tie up plants, all those things.
Could you look at other developments around there, even in Riverstone, and there's not as much landscaping?
That's why we're different.
But I still think a good filter is what's the most public facing,
Right.
right? For the monuments and the landscaping. That's our role in this, I think. So the interior that are mostly residential, and it will be the residents and the HOAs, I feel like, well, not skimp on them, but let them fill it in later, but we focus on the public, the most public facing.
I agree.
And I think we would, just sitting here thinking that through, Commissioner Randall, is we would focus on this road and this road, and then we might just go pull them all
Maybe
out.
Suzanne.
Yeah, and Suzanne, you're right. And then maybe we just go pull them out from the rest of it in order to get to that budget.
So is that the motion then you need? Reduce your scope by 20% and focus on the main drive?
So moved.
Do we want to do, Tony, do we need, excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask Tony a question. Do we need to have two separate motions to approve the irrigation and landscaping and then the second one for the monuments?
So from my understanding, you're not looking to decrease any cost for irrigation.
I think what Phil had said was he was looking at a 20% reduction in the 1441.
Correct.
Okay, not just the plantings, but just the overall.
Yeah, I need to, if that's the board's direction is to make it a budget-driven project, then we're gonna go figure out how to achieve that through irrigation, bushes, trees, turf. Trying to maintain the vision I just heard, which is keep the public-facing roads, the primary public roads, as cool as you can.
So I
My
think you
my
could
feeling
probably
is
do
we're
that in one
selling a
motion.
concept, and we need to hold true to what we've sold people on this, but I don't think by dialing back about 20% and being careful where we place this, that we're not holding true. I think we are still. We just have to be a little more, thoughtful about where we put these things. I don't think, ideally, nobody would even know we've cut back anything. When this is done, it's still gonna look great.
Olivia has a motion on the floor.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
On the monuments, what I was after from the board is, this was not an action item because, because of this, there's kind of so many options. Does the board want us to go back to the drawing board? What's your thinking? Do you want to put one monument at each entry? Do you want to just put two monuments at Atlas and nothing else?
I mean, I just thought of this, but is it too much to have two? Or is that
I'm wondering.
overwhelming? Like, is that too much?
I'm kind of
Or
wondering.
I mean, the road isn't that wide. How wide
I
is it?
mean, these are so massive, it almost seems like one in the travel lane might look kind of normal.
What's your thought, Phil?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. When I saw the numbers back, I mean, honestly, when I came back, my initial reaction was, let's put one at Atlas and call it good. But on the other hand, I do like the idea of, at each of the major entries, we have a definition. And one of the things that I keep needing to talk to Tony about is, how do we, if we're going to weave in the Ignite logo at some point in these. And so is there, and I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but we could think about weaving that Ignite logo somewhere in the entry, even if it's just a plaque off to the side where you walk by it. But I'm probably landing on where you would do one at each entry.
And you don't need a motion for that.
No, because it's not an action item.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's one of
But
the
that's-
options.
yeah, sorry, let me get to I know I'm flipping through these, but it's
I think we
option
have
2, right?
consensus that
Wait.
would be a
So
Option
head nods work.
path.
I think the
Option
board
one.
just gives direction on kind of how they want things to be
Direction,
pursued.
option one.
Yeah, and then what we'll do is now that we have this, if this is your general direction, we'll go back. We'll probably cajole Tommy a little bit more, see if we can't find some savings somewhere, refine that number, and then come back at the next board meeting with an action item for you guys to actually authorize that.
That sounds good.
Okay?
Phil, one question. You said on the main entry monument coming in off the roundabout there, there's a retaining wall back underneath there?
Behind, yeah.
So that was not priced originally into the sign.
It was not, and,
So obviously, the price has been increased because of the retaining wall that was not part of that.
correct.
So it's almost like we should almost separate that out.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
and,
an additional cost that wasn't originally scheduled in.
yeah, do you remember that number? It was like 86?
85,000.
85,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're now 85,000 more because of an unscheduled entity that got added at the,
Yeah.
without us seeing it. Okay. Okay.
I think that is all I have, unless the board has other questions for me.
Any further questions for Mr. Boyd?
Okay?
Appreciate it.
Yep, you betcha. I will toss out, if the board has an inclination or board members want to go out and look at the site when stuff is going on. We have construction meetings on Wednesday. They start at 9. We're usually finished by 10:30. We're glad to take you on a tour after that. That's a time that works. If there's some other time, just, you can communicate with us and we would get it organized. Because it's not something you see every day. And there's a lot of moving parts out there, and it's pretty cool to see what you guys have accomplished out there.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that. I guess we should try and schedule it somehow with several of us. You don't
Yep.
want to just take one of us around there.
However you guys
It's
want
an
to.
interesting ballet going on with those dump trucks and stuff coming in and out of there and getting into the Ramsey pit and stuff.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just sat down there and observed a little bit. It's kind of,
Way to put it, ballet.
yeah,
Okay,
the diesel ballet.
I think that's how the public use it.
It's not how they do it at all. It's time for some board commissioner
Or
comments.
fences and walls.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we have one more item under executive session. We kind of skipped over the fencing and walls.
Oh,
So I'm going to go ahead and cover that here. So I sent you kind of an overview of the new standards for, recommended standards for the Atlas project for fencing and wall designs. And I have them up on the screen. We just want the board to kind of consider these. These have been recommended by the city and Bernard Willis. So you kind of see up on the screen now, we're looking at different ideas for fencing, privacy fencings. Let me get my screen up here so I can read them too. So front yard fencing, alley fencing, and privacy fencing. Kind of ideas and some standardizations to look at, because we don't want a kind of a mishmash of, fencing out there like your cyclone fencing or chicken wire or any type of thing like that. We want some type of standardization, so that's why these standards are being brought forward. And we also kind of want appropriate materials in place so that we have some consistency on that, as well as appropriate colors. And then also any issues on lighting that's in the fencing. And we also have some design, some recommendations for walls. So hopefully you had a chance to review this, but it's been recommended by the Atlas project team that we move forward with these design standards for fencing and walls.
It looks good.
We would need a motion on that front if the board is agreeable on this item.
So moved.
Second. Any questions or discussion?
Just a quick question. Is the idea that the builders that bought these different blocks of lots would probably be putting this fencing in, and it would be, similar fencing or, in different blocks of lots these builders have, or is it kind of up to the homeowner? It could be anything.
I think a little bit of
Within
both,
here.
and
Okay.
Phil can maybe help me with that, but we're kind of getting these questions now for areas 1 and 2 for the bluegrass development. These homeowners and the design, and the builders are starting to think about what type of fencing they can put in, and that's what really was the energy behind getting these standards developed.
I think it makes sense, and everything sounds logical in here.
The other kind of element of it is making sure the heights and the way that the ends are treated and the fronts of the house are treated, that we have consistency. The materials and can change a little bit, and it doesn't look, too bad. It adds character to it, right? You have a little different fence than I do. But if your fence is 6 feet tall and mine's 2 feet tall and Commissioner Chapkus is 6 feet tall, it starts to look really weird and disorganized. And so that was part of it. And Hillary Anderson and Del Hatch deserve the credit, because they really did a nice job putting this together and thinking what would be appropriate down there.
Boy, yeah. Yeah, they did.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Before I go to Board Commissioners' comment, I have another question for Phil that I forgot to ask earlier about the landscaping and stuff. There was a few acres of grass and stuff in there. Now is this going to be maintained by the HOA, the homeowners, or is the city going to be maintaining the strip?
The HOA.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, I just want to make sure of that.
And just on that topic as well, one of the things that we've been slowly putting together, why we're thinking about it, is all the infrastructure that the HOA needs to maintain. Because in this situation, this subdivision has a fair amount that the HOA has to maintain. Eventually, Tony will have to develop HOA fees. And so we've been working through identifying some of those unique stormwater systems I told you about. The city doesn't want to maintain them. They're not difficult to maintain. The city just does not want the responsibility for them. So that goes into the HOA bucket. So we've been slowly building an HOA manual, maintenance manual, because you want to be able to hand that to your HOA contractor and say, this is what I expect you to do, and here's the quality I expect you to achieve, because we spent all this money creating a great neighborhood, and we don't want you to run it into the ground.
Nice. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Now it's time for Board Commissioner comments. And seeing or hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll se-
All in
You got
favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thanks. That's a wrap. Jeff.